So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Shihoko Goto, the director of the Indo-Pacific program here at the Wilson Center. When the voters of Taiwan took to the polls on January 13th earlier this year, it was essentially a win for Taiwan's democracy, its ability to conduct free and fair elections and reflect the will of its people. Actually won the presidency, but no political party actually won the majority outright. Today, we will be discussing how to ensure Taiwan's international space and protect peace in Taiwan, and before and after the inauguration, which takes place on May 20th. And we'll also take this opportunity to discuss Taiwan's domestic interests and prospects for resilience within its own borders, as well as US-Taiwan relations moving forward. So we will be having this conversation in two parts. First, we will be having a conversation between Ambassador Tah-Ray Yui, who is the TECRO representative here in the United States, who will also be joined by the former Deputy Secretary of State, Ambassador Negroponte. We will then have this conversation for 40 minutes, after which we will have a panel discussion to discuss U.S. interests in Taiwan. So with that, Ambassador Negroponte, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Oh, now it's green, right? Okay. We're live. Thank you for bringing us together, to you, Shihoko, and to Wilson Center, and to your Asia-Pacific program. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Ambassador Yui, interestingly, if you start with what his educational background is, he got both his bachelor's and his master's at Texas A&M University, and he studied in an American high school in Panama prior to that. And he went almost immediately after graduating, getting his master's, he joined his government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a few years later he achieved entry into the Taiwan Foreign Service. He's had a great variety of jobs. He's been a vice foreign minister. He's served in at the European Union and in Brussels. I think that was your most recent assignment before coming here. And he's had an assortment of assignments prior to that: Geneva, posts in Latin America, and so forth. In fact, he's kind of a specialist on Latin America, the Spanish language and history. One of the things he studied at Texas A&M. I thought that maybe we could divide this discussion, Ambassador, first a little bit about Taiwan's democracy, which Shihoko already referred to, then the economic situation, and then security and your international relations. So over to you, Ambassador, and if you could just talk a little bit to us about, and then leave time, I would say half of the time, for comments and questions from the participants. But to talk to us about the state of Taiwan democracy.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Shihoko, for the introduction, and good morning for a Monday morning event. Very happy to be back at Wilson Center, and as Shihoko mentioned, we had an election in January. This is a big election year for the democratic world, and we were one of the first in the ring. And you know, Taiwan's democracy is, as a full democracy, we're a fairly recent one. We didn't have direct elections to choose our president until 1996. Indeed, we didn't achieve a full, change in government between two political parties via elections until the year 2000. So that's fairly recent, 20-some years. But we've grasped the notion of democracy very well. We went through a transformation since 1949 when Chiang Kai-shek came to the island with the whole government, bureaucracy, and many part of the military, part of the refugees, etc. And this whole transformation into what Taiwan is today, democracy achieved is one of the highlights. But I want to mention, also plug in a little bit about the Taiwan Relations Act, which we're celebrating 45 years of Taiwan Relations Act. In 1979, when U.S. ended relations with the Republic of China, Taiwan, prospects were very dim in Taiwan. We were at the low point of our international existence. In 1971, we were forced to leave the United Nations. We used to represent China at the United Nations. We were part of the Security Union Security Council, one of the permanent fives. In 1979, we were forced to leave, and after 71, a string of countries started to leave recognition against the PRC. So in 1979, when the United States also left, it was pretty dim prospect. But U.S. Congress passed Taiwan Relations Act. It was a bedrock of future relations between Taiwan and United States in the absence of diplomatic relations, and that has been a very solid but also stable relationship, and also stable for Taiwan to be able to develop its transformation into a democratic society, but at the same time to develop our economy the way it is now. We now talk about TSMC in Taiwan as if it's part of our lives, but if it wasn't for this stability that we had after 1979 to be able to grow the way we did, it would not have happened. But the elections in January, past January, again, Lai Ching-te won, our current vice president. It went against the wishes of the PRC. They tried everything in their toolbox to try to dissuade our electorate to not choose him. And they were basically putting two messages in Taiwan, that this was a choice between, this election was not an election to solve your daily problems. It's not about your cost of living was more expensive, about real estate prices being more expensive. It was a choice between going to war and peace. If you chose this person, we will go into war with PRC. If you chose the other person, there will be peace and stability, and products that were banned will be, readmitted into the Chinese market, etc. And second message they were trying to instill in our electorate was in what we call in Chinese 以美论, this doubting U.S. Theory, that your closest, your so-called closest allies, United States and others, but mainly United States, were not as reliable as one would think it is. That they were intent on selling us very expensive weapons, and then that all this tension between in the era was caused by the United States, fighting against the two titans between, fighting each other, and we were stuck in between. And that once this war or this aggression started, you will nowhere near see them around, because you do not expect U.S. servicemen to shed blood for Taiwan. And so the two messages, the conclusion were the same: a peace to mainland China, and everything will be fine. That was basically the whole message. Obviously, our electorate is mature enough that they decided to choose the person they wanted to win. Despite all the misinformation, manipulation information, there was the whole range. When we shared our experience that we went through during the elections, in terms of foreign interference in our information with many of you. But at the end, Lai Ching-te won. And Shihoko also mentioned that although he won, but he won with 40-some% of the votes. So there's now the messaging that's coming out from mainland China is, but this gentleman this pro-independence activist, he's not really he does not represent the people because he's a minority president. He only got 40% of the votes. Although there were 3 candidates and they got 40, 20-some percent, 30 of the votes, but he went through a democratic process and he won. The DPP now has a minority in Congress, in Legislative Yuan. They have 1 less in comparison to the Kuomintang Party, and then there's 8 votes or 8 seats from the Taiwan People's Party. It's a new scenario, but also it's important to note that this is the first time in our fairly new democracy that after 8 years of being from the ruling party, that the ruling party continues to rule after 8 years. This is the first time that there will be a transition from the same ruling party to the other, to the same party. And this is a new experience for Taiwan too. And how to deal with a ruling party, government, a president with a minority in legislative yuan will also be a new experience. But that's part of the democratic process, and we'll learn how to deal with it. And hopefully that through these challenges we'll grow into a more mature democracy.
Ambassador, I'm old enough to say that I lived through basically all of this history, observing it admittedly from a distance. Although, and I hope he's watching today, I was a vice consul in Hong Kong in 1962 when I went to visit Stape Roy, who was the ambassador's aide in Taipei.
Really?
And I went and visited him. I spent a week with him. He had a lovely apartment up in Yangmingshan. And then we got into his Volkswagen and we drove all around Taiwan. We went to Taichung, where we would teach Chinese, and I believe we may still do that there, I don't know, and Sun Moon Lake and all those different things. So I have very fond memories of that period. But, taking another angle on the fact that your first direct elections for a president were whatever they were in the late 80s or early 90s. 1996. I got to say, for most or much of my adult life, Taiwan, and certainly under Chiang Kai-shek, had a reputation of authoritarian governance. It was, and I think it actually was one of the things that hurt Taiwan at the time in this whole debate about recognition and the United Nations and so forth. And you wonder if it had been a democracy that it has become, whether it would have been as easy for us to vote against your continuation holding the seat in the United Nations. But in any case, the comment I would make is that it's you have worked incredibly rapidly, and it's quite amazing that you've achieved this reputation for having a really solid democracy in your country, and have done it in such a short period of time. It's a positive development. Sorry.
No, certainly, it is, again, this transformation from an authoritarian regime into a democracy, a full democracy. There were no revolutions. There was no revolution. There was no armed, movement, or there were some protests. DPP. Now, as the party, many of the leaders then were dissidents. They're being chased by the Kuomintang Party, by the government, because at that time we were under martial law and no political, parties were allowed to be formed, or political activities were mostly banned. But this process, went fairly peaceful. It was fairly peaceful, but again, a lot of encouragement from many friends, including the United States, and the tender, loving care, or the watchful eyes. But also, many of us went to school in the United States, including myself. And we absorbed your values. We absorbed your way of life. I learned to understand what U.S. football means. At the beginning, it was strange. You just saw, I don't know, 20 sumo wrestlers hitting each other for 10 seconds and everything stopped. They go, well, this is a strange game. And then it starts all over again, you know. And then all of a sudden somebody kicks the ball, you know, it's like, wow. But anyways, you know, so many of the people who came to the United States learned and, you know, went back. Again, this is a whole process. This is what United States is promoting your values all over the world, and I would like to say that, you know, Taiwan's experience, what we have today, is a success story in terms of democratic development. But obviously, we're under constant challenge from mainland China, and that's and we also thank many of U.S. friends nowadays who are concerned about Taiwan's well-being. You know, we have many opinions on how Taiwan should be preserved, should be defended, should be, you know, avoided being absorbed by, encroached by mainland China, and we appreciate all the good opinions, but which means that there is a lot of attention and care about the well-being of Taiwan.
Why don't we move on, because
Sure.
I realize I'm
Yep.
getting a bit short on time. Maybe if we could just review the economic situation briefly, Ambassador. I mean, today, according to what I've been reading, in nominal terms at least, you're the fourth richest country in the world in terms of per capita GDP, largest producer of semiconductors, especially advanced semiconductors. So how do you see the future of the Taiwan economy and the investment opportunities in Taiwan on the one hand, and your investment opportunities abroad, especially now that we're pursuing nearshoring policies and investment is leaving China? And do you see that also as an opportunity to play some kind of a role in that process?
No, we keep talking about, you know, Taiwan's future and whether mainland China when it's going to attack or, you know, Taiwan or try to absorb Taiwan into PRC's realm. And besides putting a better effort at deterrence against mainland China, in terms of defense capabilities, in terms of asymmetric warfare, all these concepts, in which we are doing, you know, again, we are well aware that we need to increase our security preparations against any eventual or possible Chinese aggression. But also, it's important to be integrated economically in the world, and to as much integration we do with the world, the better we are protected against mainland Chinese aggression. And in terms of economy, okay, no problem. Well, if you have directions to a safer Taiwan, let me know too. But economic integration is very important, and that's why we're pushing for many. We want to join CPTPP in Asia Pacific. We want to, if IPEF, you know, the U.S. promoted this, you know, trade pact is allows others to join. Taiwan will be happy to join IPEF. We are in talks with the United States on the 21st Century Trade Initiative, which we just concluded the second stage part of the second stage talks, and will continue under the new government, which is the same, you know, again, same parties. Our trade negotiator has been will be the same. Charles Deng will continue to be him, and will continue to promote better trading relations with the United States. We're trying to have an avoidance for double taxation passing in Congress. We're very close. We're waiting for Senate to clear their issues, and hopefully will pass as soon as possible. All this is to make sure that investments from Taiwan to United States and from United States to Taiwan are you know, is more profitable. You know, they don't have to pay double taxes. Our companies, and it's a big difference whether they pay or not, as compared to other countries who do enjoy the avoidance of double taxation.
Tax treaty, is it? Or?
Yeah, it's avoidance of double taxation. Actually, companies from Taiwan who invest in the United States as compared to other companies from countries who do enjoy double taxation, the difference in taxes is at least 20%. So it's a big difference, whether TSMC, who is already in Arizona, it's about profits, margins, and all that. So many of our companies are concerned, when that ADTA will pass. But this is one issue. But again, economic integration with the world, the better we're integrated, the better we are, and that only goes beyond economic relations. We already are, as you mentioned, I think if you count, I think we're the 21st economy in the world right now in terms of economic performance. We do more business. We are your eighth largest trading partner. Meaning, again, I mentioned this a lot because as a perspective, we do more business together. We trade more together more than what you trade with in the Netherlands, with France, with Italy, with India, with Brazil, all these big countries. So see, we are a relevant economy, but to be integrated more into the international society, also, which we'll probably talk later, but it's also important for us to be integrated into international organizations. For example, the better we are integrated with the world, the safer we are. And again, Taiwan is a very special political situation in the world. We have very few diplomatic countries who recognize us, but our presence in the world is felt. An aggression, a war in Taiwan or Taiwan Straits, its effects to the world economy, to the world trade, and to the world as a whole, your daily lives will impact. Is far more reaching than what is happening in Ukraine nowadays. So Taiwan's well-being is relevant to the United States, is relevant to the world.
So, Ambassador, maybe we should transition to the security aspect. You've been talking about it quite a bit in the course of your remarks, but maybe I could make a statement first, which I think is correct. I don't think support for Taiwan has ever been stronger in Washington than it has been in these recent years. And I mean, I think it's rather remarkable. And one way you could sort of measure that is if you look at the votes for the $95 billion of assistance to Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. Taiwan got, in the House of Representatives, 385 to 34. Israel, 366 to 58. And Ukraine, 311 to 112. So Taiwan, by far the most, or by a substantial margin, the most popular of those aid packages. It may not have been large in terms of money, but in terms of political support, I think it's really quite important. So it seems to me, and you were talking about deterrence earlier, I think America's as prepared as ever before, or maybe more so, to help provide the kind of deterrence that is needed to protect you from attack by mainland China. But do you want to talk a little bit about the whole deterrence strategy and also weave into that the question of the recognition strategy that you've been working on as well? And you mentioned representation in international organizations. I think on the economic front, you're members of WTO and of APEC. I'm not sure you're a member. Are you a member of the World Bank or not? No. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, anyway, there's a lot there on the table a lot to talk about. But mainly your deterrence strategy and how we can help and how the world can help.
Well, deterrence means, with a good deterrence, we've been a lot of talk in the United States is we want to make sure to get the message to Xi Jinping that if he's ever thinking about attacking Taiwan, it won't happen today, and then it's every day. It's not today, and that basically is the strategy of deterrence, that we will make ourselves so well prepared that any thoughts of Xi Jinping trying to put his hands on Taiwan, he'll have to think twice. But again, deterrence not only comes from defense, from military procurement, but also from the world's making Xi Jinping know that you do care about what happens to Taiwan or the Taiwan Strait, the well-being, the peace and stability of status quo of the Taiwan and Taiwan Straits. It's very relevant. So it's two-pronged. It's not only defense, but also international concern support on Taiwan's straits, peace and stability. But on the security side, again, our government under President Tsai Ing-wen, she has raised the preparedness and also our investment in defense considerably, and it's now 2.5% of our GDP what we spend in defense, and we're being, besides procuring foreign military sales from the United States to Taiwan. In the last, for just President Biden's terms, there's been at least 20 sales to Taiwan. And although, again, there's an issue about delivery, there's a lot of talk about that, but also there was a report issued by the Pentagon in January about defense in the industry capability, and placed Taiwan in the list on the friendshoring capable or ready countries. So we will also be happy to be part of the co-development, co-producing partners in the military hardware, and so that we can do more in Taiwan. We already produce many of our own weapon systems. We have missile systems. We have ships, we have planes, we just launched our own submarine a couple months ago. It's under testing, etc. But we'll be building more of those. So all that requires, but also not just hardware, but also in terms of readiness for the island as a whole. The whole society, resilience component is important. Not only for the military career military force, but also the whole society, how we deal with an act of aggression or emergency situations in Taiwan. And we're looking at the different best practices from different countries, here in the United States, but also Europe, etc., and how to better adapt our citizens to deal with these situations. We had an earthquake early in April. A big one, and compared to the 1999 big earthquake, which was similar in scale, and the 1999 earthquake, there was over 2,000 deaths, 2,400 deaths, but on the April 4th earthquake, I think it's less than 20 so far. Unfortunate, but the casualty count is much lower, partly because we've learned from our past experience, better building codes, etc. But also the way our rescue teams responded, how the society, aid agencies, NGOs responded to taking care of this emergency situations was fairly better handled, much better handled. So it's a real window of what we're doing in terms of preparation for disaster relief or disaster preparation. But that's again, we are doing our part to prepare ourselves better to any eventual aggressions. But any help from the United States, from friends, is welcome. We bought most of our arms, and as we mentioned, there's been a grant from the United States, the supplemental $2 billion. Not all of it will go to Taiwan, but we appreciate any help and grants that coming from the United States. We have also foreign military financing and presidential drawdown authority, different ways for Taiwan to acquire its needed military hardware from the United States. It's all well appreciated. So again, we're preparing ourselves better and doing our part, but also appreciate all the help that we can get from friends, including the United States.
So we have a few minutes left for questions. I'm sorry, I didn't leave quite enough time, but when you do raise your hand, please just briefly identify yourself and ask a brief question. Yes, sir.
Thank you both ambassadors. My name is Ken Scabe from Marubeni Corporation. It's a Japanese private company. So because Ambassador you have mentioned about CPTPP. So I think so joining CPTPP is very tough task for actually not only for Taiwan but also China. And but so obviously there's a long way to go. So what is your strategy for joining CPTPP?
Well, very briefly, CPTPP is a very high level, trade agreement between, trade pact, and we think we meet all the requirements. It's a very high bar, trade agreement. And for example, the 21st century trade pact that we're talking with the United States, it's at or higher than the CPTPP level. So we meet the requirements, and we've been talking to all the existing members of the CPTPP about our that we've applied to join CPTPP. And we're waiting for CPTPP to start forming commissions for to applicant countries, and that's the advantage we have over PRC, that they don't really meet the requirements of the CPTPP, but we do. And again, we hope that the entrance into the CPTPP, the process will be mainly on technical merits and less about political aspects, interference in terms of our accession in the CPTPP. But we do meet the requirements, and we're willing to be part of the CPTPP so that we can prosper together in the same as Asia Pacific region.
That was a question. Yes, sir. In the tan suit, yeah.
Probably don't need this. Marvin Ott, Wilson Center. Ambassador Negroponte, I'm old enough to actually have lived through everything you're talking about.
Great.
I'll just note that in '62, I visited Kinmen.
Wow.
And I don't know if you want to make any comments about Taiwan continuing to hold those small specks of land, which are kind of hostages to fortune if you're a Chinese strategist looking at the situation. So I invite you to comment, if you want, on the status of those small islets. But the larger question, the more interesting one for me, would be relations with Japan. The U.S. is your principal security and economic partner, but Japan looms very large. And I wonder what sort of prospects you see from Taipei's standpoint of enlisting Japan more overtly into the security picture in Taiwan.
What's happening?
Well, Kinmen, Matsu, as you can see, you can see, mainland China from you can see Xiamen from, Jingmen, and Matsu is also very close to the coast. And these are our territories that we hold. And although when you were there, we had a very large military presence, everything was underneath and all that. But nowadays, our military presence is fairly low. And I think under current battle strategies, it's a different way of doing war, although Kinmen in the last few months is being under constant harassment for mainland China, especially the security waters around Kinmen. They've been also trying to breach, having their coastal patrols. There was an incident about this, this illegal boat running into Kinmen, and then when they were chased by our Coast Guard, it flipped and caused 2 deaths and all that. But so far measured in terms of our both sides' reaction to that. But again, even, the outlying islands, Kinmen, Penghu, even Penghu, Matsu, etc., even the island, the South China Sea that we also hold, very small islands, Taipingdao, etc., whether that's defendable, but we'll do our best to defend it because it's still our territory. But again, there's a grand strategy in terms of what if mainland China decides to attack Taiwan. Some people say, well, they'll probably take Jingmen first, and then go on step by step. Personally, I think if they're going to attack Taiwan or start aggression on Taiwan, starting from Jingmen is actually not, because once you start, and the aggression starts. So you might as well go for Taiwan instead of Jingmen, because if you go after Jingmen, you're actually sort of giving us a warning, pre-warning about what your real intention is right there.
You may be provoking a response before you really achieved anything.
Exactly. So again, strategy has changed, but it is still our territory, and we're doing what we can the best how to put our defenses in those islands. Japan, again, we're part of the neighborhood, and that's why you've seen the U.S. gathering all the forces, or this alignment with Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and then AUKUS, and all these movements. It has to do with that, and we're in the neighborhood. So the better, the more that is being the linkages towards this preparation, I think is beneficial for Taiwan. And our relation with Japan is also growing, in a substantive way, and you can see by the very constant visits from different, congressional, and the statements that come out of the government of Japan regarding the Taiwan Strait. It's also very positive. So yeah, it's going in a pretty good way in terms of Taiwan, Japan, pragmatic relations.
So, okay, one final question, quickly, please, so we can stay on our schedule. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. My name is Anne from IRI. Could you speak more about the civil or citizen preparedness in terms of political resilience, especially when there's a strong disinformation campaign from PRC in the country? What are certain tactics that you do, and what type of support you may need from the U.S. as well?
Thank you. Yeah, we get a lot of. I think Taiwan is the place who gets the most internet attacks and hacks and intents. I think for our foreign ministry, where I think we're the most we receive the most cyber attacks of all the government agencies. Foreign ministries is the one who gets. I think when the Speaker Pelosi was visiting Taiwan, Foreign Ministry's portal was attacked. I don't know how many 170 million times a minute or a second. Something. It was something just outrageous. But we have been able to deal with it fairly successfully, and there are different ways to do it. But about misinformation is very easy. Basically, again, there are different ways to deal with it, but the best way is to debunk all this misinformation as soon as you detect it. It's numerous, but you have to just tirelessly, just erase it. This is a fake news. This is not real. This is artificial intelligence. This deep fake, whatever. You have to just raise it and make sure that it's fake, and citizens' awareness is better because they know and they have they have a better judgment, and so, well, this image it looks a little funny, so they'll have, and then soon after, government or even NGOs who fact-checking NGOs will come and say this is false information. This worked very well during our elections, to try to prevent this massive misinformation from swaying our electors. Whether there was effect, yeah, there was an effect. For example, that's why the election came out this way. But generally speaking, it's a new war. It's a new form of warfare against. So I stress it's not just the military aspect of what we have going through, but also different aspects. But we have a lot of experience with that. I just want to conclude by saying, again, Ambassador looking at me very, it's
No,
like-
no, 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 no. Come on. I know, you
No.
can have all the time you
I
want.
want to
Ambassador.
stress that we are not troublemakers, and we're not the ones making the area sensitive, making the area nervous, or Taiwan. We've been under threat from mainland China for many decades. This did not just start now. It started before I was born in Taiwan, and that's because we chose a way of life that does not agree with PRC's constitution. In their constitution, Taiwan is part of the PRC, and in their constitution, the Chinese Communist Party is the only entity who can rule China, and we are part of that. So if we are able to talk to each other, we have to insist that it will be on equal footing, respectful, reciprocal. But the mainland China has to drop the fact that we are the only ones who can rule you, the same way. They're still offering us one country, two systems. Do you believe that? Nowadays, they say, oh, but you can live under one country, two systems. Yeah, I don't think so. No, really. But they are still offering that, and also they try to label our new president, coming president, as a pro-independence activist. President Lai has already mentioned very clearly that he follows President Tsai's same path in terms of cross-strait relations, in terms of international relations, and also he's abided by the DPP party's stance on who we are today, that the Republic of China, the formal name of our country in Taiwan, is already a sovereign, independent country. And therefore, there is really no need for us to declare ourselves independent again. And declaring independence actually means that we are subject to someone right now, and we're not. So there's really no indication that that President Lai is going to declare independence once he goes into the government. And also, pro-independence activism in Taiwan for the Chinese actually means anyone who's against being absorbed into the Chinese Communist regime is a pro-independence activist. And that's my personal opinion. If that is the case, Chiang Kai-shek is the largest pro-independence activist because he's the one who brought the whole government to Taiwan and resisted being absorbed by the PRC ever since. So we will stick with very measured, very logical, the way of the status quo. We don't want to create problems. We will not declare independence, but we do want for the world to recognize us as who we are. We are not subordinate to the People's Republic of China. We need to our own international space. We have shown the world that we are able to contribute to world betterment. In terms of technology, in terms of health, in terms of whatever, we are able to contribute. But we need for you to give us a chance to be able to contribute to the world peace and world betterment. And President Lai will continue in that pathway, very responsibly. And this is my message to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Yui, Ambassador Negroponte. If I can ask our speakers for the second panel to join us now.
There we go.
Thank you. You gonna drink this? You can have this.
Switch. There we go. All right. How would you want it?
Yeah, how's this?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, that was a smooth transition. A lot of ground was covered by the conversation between the two ambassadors, and now we're going to talk a little bit, let some sparks fly. I am delighted to be able to welcome three amazing speakers to discuss U.S. interests in Taiwan moving forward. First up, I've asked Carolyn Bartholomew to speak. She is the former chairman of the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. Following her will be Elbridge Colby. Bridge is a co-founder of the Marathon Initiative and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development. And then we have Robert Daly, who is the director of the Kissinger Institute on China and the United States. So let me first start with you, Carolyn. The relationship between the United States and the PRC has become an entrenched strategic competition. How does this alter or shift U.S. interests in Taiwan from both an economic as well as a regional security perspective?
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chihoko, for inviting me, and thanks to the Wilson Center, and it's great to be on the panel with these distinguished experts. I'm not old enough to have been in any of these places in 1962, but I've been around doing this for a long time. I will note that it's really wonderful to see so many young people here in the room and ready to step up and take on the cause. Take on the cause, I think, is a good way to put it. As Chihoko mentioned, I've spent 20 years on the U.S.-China Commission and would just note that for those 20 years, we had consistently made recommendations to the U.S. Congress about actions that need to be taken to support Taiwan. So there's lots of ideas in there. I'll talk about a couple of them specifically. Chihoko, I wanted to sort of globalize this a little bit, because I think that since Russia's war against Ukraine, the dynamic in terms of geopolitics and geoeconomics has shifted some. And I think it creates some opportunities. To my mind, one of the most important things that the United States can do, I know, Bridge, you're going to talk about the military piece of this, but one of the most important things that the United States can do is to continue to strengthen the alliances and friendships and relationships that we have with people around the world, and to help Taiwan's resilience that isn't limited to the countries in the Indo-Pacific. I think Europe is there are a lot of opportunities now that again, seeing Russia's attack against Ukraine has made made Europe wake up, I think, to some of the threats that are there. And I think, frankly, when we acknowledge and really applaud Taiwan's democracy, to my mind, we are in a global challenge, actually, of democracy versus autocracy. And when we are talking now about Taiwan and potential Chinese action, I think we have to acknowledge that China's relationship with North Korea, China's relationship with Russia, and China's relationship with Iran means that any action is going to be far more global. So any response needs to be far more global. So that really is the thing that I think that we need to be focused on here in the United States. And I commend, actually, the Biden administration for some of the domestic steps that they've taken here, expanding the tariffs, the Trump tariffs that have been in, looking at strengthening our tech abilities here in the United States to be economically strong moving into the future, and again, the relationships that they have reestablished and strengthened in the region and around the world. I specifically would note AUKUS, of course, the relationships with Japan and relationships with South Korea. But on Europe, I just want to note that one of the recommendations in the Commission's 2023 report is that Congress should direct the administration to engage in discussion with European allies on plans and preparations to impose economic sanctions on China in the event of a confrontation over Taiwan, an escalation in China's support for Russia, or other contingencies. And I think that that's a really important point. It's a really important action that would have deterrent effects. The Chinese need, the PRC, the government of the PRC needs to understand that any attack on Taiwan is going to have economic consequences that are global economic consequences. The ambassador mentioned that. But I think it would be important for people to understand, for the PRC to understand that there are plans in place. I think that in terms of the Russia sanctions, the fact that there had been discussions about Russia sanctions prior to this attack on Ukraine, I think helped the sanctions aren't as effective as we would like them to be, but certainly helped. There were ideas, there were plans in place in terms of what to do. So I think that really is one of the things that the U.S. should be doing. So we need to engage more diplomatically. We need to engage more militarily. We need to engage more economically. As somebody who had to manage 12 commissioners, some of whom didn't believe in free trade agreements and some of whom did, I would just say I think it's probably time to change the name of some of these things. I was sitting around last night trying to think of what we could call it, and I came up with reciprocal economic expansion, so that we're not triggering trade, we're not triggering free trade, we're not triggering agreement. But I think that strengthening those economic relationships both ways with countries in the region is a really important thing. I am just in awe of the people of Taiwan. It is a new and young democracy, and yet it has demonstrated over and over again the strength of its democracy. Free press, we know what the press is like in Taiwan, and it's just a really important model and gives lie to the idea that the PRC tried to do, which is that nobody in Asia was democratically inclined. And I think that we need to, again, as a democratic country, we need to really work with other democracies and other countries in order to continue to support what Taiwan is doing.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And yeah, if I were a member of Congress, I'd totally vote for your REEUA, reciprocal economic expansion proposal. Rich, you
Great.
are not shy about sharing your thoughts. I'm hoping you could share some of your thoughts today about U.S. security interests in defending Taiwan.
Well, a little bit different than that, but thank you, Shihoko. It's great to be here at the Wilson Center with a lot of friends, Ambassador Negroponte, Shihoko. It's great to be on with Carolyn and Robert, also distinguished career in the House and on the Commission and so forth. So pleasure to be here, although I'm going to be a little less optimistic. I'm going to differ with Carolyn, but I will do so. I'll start out by conceding a major point to her, which is that I think, and I could see by Ambassador Yui's head nodding that he agrees with you, and I know Foreign Minister Wu and Vice President-Elect Bi Kim Hsiao agree with you. Unfortunately, I think that's not the right strategy for Taiwan. I think Taiwan is in real danger, and I think the level of support for defending Taiwan, the level needed in the face of what the PLA can really do when the President of the United States, whether it's Joe Biden or somebody else, President Trump, I hope it's President Trump, but that butcher's bill is going to be very sobering at best. And I've talked to Foreign Minister Wu about it, and he is tripling down in his foreign affairs article that we are in a war of democracy. I saw you nodding when he said war of democracy and autocracy, and that the Europeans, I'll give this, I wrote a piece in the Taipei Times over the weekend, and it was after my trip to Taiwan, and what I did give more credit to is my impression of the adoption by the Taiwan government of an genuinely asymmetric approach, at least at the political level. So that seems to be significant progress. That was not always the case. But the level of defense spending and effort, honestly, there is almost no discernible sign that Taiwan is a country that's about to be invaded, potentially, by a country with 100 times the people, that competes at the forefront of human technology with the United States, and that has a larger Navy and soon will have a larger Air Force than the United States in the world, not just in Asia, and has doubled its missile inventory in the last 3 years, which is already the most daunting missile inventory in the world. Now that the invading force is not going to be stopped by hashtags, and it's not going to be stopped by thoughts and prayers, and it's not going to be stopped by economic sanctions, which frankly I question whether most countries would even impose, including this country, especially if Taiwan were rapidly overrun, which is plausible. But how do we know? Well, Carolyn mentioned the Russia sanctions, which are a complete failure. I mean, I don't mean that like in a moralistic way. If they worked, I would support them. But one, they definitely haven't changed Russia's strategic decision-making, obviously. Two, they've not really inhibited Russia's military rebuild. Russia has militarized a larger portion of its economy, and according to General Cavoli, don't take it from me, and Kurt Campbell, it now has a larger army than when it started. Now, they're refurbishing stuff and yada, 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 but I don't know if you saw, but they're just breaking into near Kharkiv, and the Ukrainians are in a not very well-organized defensive retreat around that area. Now, we don't know what's going on, but the war in Ukraine is not going well. We've just spent another $61 billion, depending on how you measure it, on Ukraine that didn't go to Taiwan. I agree with Mike Gallagher's assessment that the Taiwan provisions of the supplemental were a joke. Of course, Taiwan itself decided to go along with the supplemental, which is the single most potent argument I find in trying to argue for more of a focus on Taiwan. which of course raises tremendous questions about, in addition to the fact that Taiwan is not a society that's preparing to, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said the other day, fight with our fingernails. That is not the impression that Taiwan gives. It's in fact opposing those of us who want to focus more on Taiwan. So that is a disturbing, and I've said this directly to the leadership in Taipei, just so you know. I think, by the way, the economic sanctions may, when we consider the fact that Russia is 1/10 the size of the European economy and has very little economic impact in the United States, sanctions on China by the United States would drive inflation to unheard of heights. I don't know if people are saying, but people are pretty unhappy about inflation in this country. So I think unless we have a viable military defense of Taiwan, it's going to be hard. It's going to be real hard. And look, I think it's great that Taiwan's a democracy. I'm very impressed. I mean, the progress that's made since Chiang Kai-shek. On the other hand, the Kuomintang government did spend a lot on defense. So, you know, that would be good. And by the way, I reject the idea that one party or candidate in the Taiwanese political situation is the only one who's pro-U.S. I think the United States could work. None of the candidates, as I understand it, running for president in Taipei, in Taiwan, was endorsing one country, two system, let alone unification with China. The KMT is the Speaker of the House. The KMT, the Ho Yui, the candidate, his article in Foreign Affairs was not, avoiding provocation, but supported defense spending increases. We'll see if that's genuine or not, if that reflects the real view of the KMT. But I totally reject the idea that's common in this city that the DPP is the only party that's consistent with American interests. In fact, if the DPP is, looking for more international space, is certainly perceived, fairly or not, as a worker of Taiwan independence by Beijing, and yet is not actually initiating the military buildup that would go along. So Taiwan currently seems to me to be pursuing the least rational course of action. There is two sort of courses of action that are coherent. One, which I would assume the DPP would want to do, which is, protect the status quo, obviously more international space, and a very vigorous and significant military buildup. Okay, they're doing the first part, but they're not doing the second part. Or you could do, in a sense, you could do what Ma Ying-jeou, and I'm not endorsing this, but Ma Ying-jeou is going and trying to accommodate Beijing and avoiding provocation and a military buildup. That is coherent. If I were Taiwanese, I would pick the military buildup, but I'm not Taiwanese. The single worst course of action is to be perceived by Beijing as moving in the direction of independence, et cetera, without a significant military buildup, and indeed urging the United States to deplete itself further in Europe. Yet that's where Taiwan is. So I think the situation is very grave. At this point, I think Taiwan's fate is on a knife's edge, and all the good wishes that you will get from people around. I concede Ambassador Negroponte's point that Taiwan has probably more support. But is that support enough to lose 10, 25, 50,000 Americans? I don't know.
Thank you, Bridge. I hope we can get back to you also to discuss how Taiwan is already under attack, great zone tactics,
Sure.
and cyber attacks, as the ambassador has talked about, what kind of steps the United States can take right now, and whether they're taking sufficient non-military action to come to the defense of Taiwan. Sure. But before I do, if I can turn to Robert Daly, we've heard a spectrum of opinions. Your thoughts?
My thoughts. You didn't get, I thought you were going to give me a really specific
I
question.
was going to ask you about the United States' broader interest in Taiwan and the U.S. role in protecting Taiwanese identity.
First, I want to say that maybe from a slightly different but related angle, I do share Bridges' sense of urgency, and I think that it puts our focus where it needs to be when we think about Taiwan and its relationship with the United States. Of course, we value what Taiwan has achieved democratically and economically. It's extremely impressive, and the democratic freedoms, the prosperity of Taiwan are very important to us. But it's not really about the democracy in the first instance. It's certainly not about semiconductors in the first instance. That issue and this question of a silicon shield, I think, gets a little bit too much attention here in town. And it's not even about, while I think it's very important, one of the things we can try to do for Taiwan is to help it find more international space, whether it's international organizations or in the trade relationship. Europe in particular, it's very important, but it's not about that either. It's about avoiding war. I think that we have to start there, and that is in fact, and it is about avoiding war in part because that is now what the United States-China relationship, I think, is primarily about. The foundation of it is not avoiding war. Therefore, deterrence is very much at the fore when we talk about Taiwan. One of the questions that I have as I don't think I'm exactly a traditionalist where U.S.-China relations is concerned, but I joined the State Department in 1987 when we still had the old dispensation and the old one China policy. And if we referred to China as a country, as Ambassador Negroponte just did, and you notice there was no audible intake of air, there was no gasp around the table. We're used to that now. As you know, there were one China policy.
Taiwan, yeah.
I'm sorry, Taiwan. You know, there were one China policy nuns at the State Department who would wrap you across the knuckles with a ruler, and we've moved beyond that for the very good reason that a lot of time has passed, and a lot of things that we said in the Shanghai Communique we would no longer say for the very good reason that they're not true, and we're trying to figure that out. But one of the questions is, in addition to deterrence and what is required there, and I defer to Bridge on that, there is a question about whether there's any role now for diplomacy at all vis-a-vis China, the United States and China. Is China reassurable on Taiwan by us at this phase at all? A number of my colleagues think that the answer is no. There's simply too much time has passed. There's too much water under the bridge. So what is the role for our diplomacy with China in order to avoid war, not only with Taiwan, but elsewhere? You mentioned our good friend Ambassador Stapleton Roy. If he were here, he would say that historically, since 1979, cross-straits relations have worked out best for the people of Taiwan from their own point of view when China was most assured or comfortable with its relationship with the United States. I think historically that's true, and I think it's fair to ask whether that is still true or achievable or not. I'm not sure that it is. I do think, and I'll make one specific recommendation. I haven't begun to cover all of the thoughts. We want to get into more discussion. But because we are already in a relationship with China, the foundation of which I take to be the avoidance of war amidst a long-term, expensive, very fraught competition to lead in shaping the global order. My thesis is that we're essentially in a new kind of Cold War with China already. It's not on the horizon. We're already there. What can we do at the margins to help in our diplomacy? And so one specific, although limited suggestion is to be clearer about the one China policy. President Biden has repeatedly said that we haven't changed it. We have. China has also violated many of its earlier agreements as it gets more and more threatening to China. Clearly, we've moved away from the one China policies that used to exist. And I think that one thing that the administration could do is state exactly what it means by the one China policy, rather than continually incoherently insisting that we still abide by it. And I think that we need to do this not just for clarity's sake, but in order to help lay the groundwork vis-a-vis Taiwan, vis-a-vis allies in Europe, and especially vis-a-vis the American people who don't know what to make of any of this. It's far too difficult. We need to be clear about what the one China policy means to us, something that we actually believe in and can actually abide by. And so as a professional courtesy, I have reduced the first three communiques to 4 sentences, which I think we could usefully state, and it cuts through a lot of that. Note that it's the communiques, not the TRA or the assurances or anything else. And I think that it's something like this, and I would welcome the group's feedback on this. What do we really believe, and then what can we abide by? 1, the United States recognizes the Chinese Communist Party's leadership of the People's Republic of China. Now, that would be very hard for many people.
Is that in the communique?
No, I'm saying we're scrapping.
Oh, you're scrapping. I thought you were
I
summarizing.
thought you were
No.
summarizing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
Okay,
doing
this is the
away with
new
all of
China
that.
policy.
No.
Okay, all right.
We've driven a horse and carriage through all of that. Now, so we recognize the Chinese Communist Party's leadership of the People's Republic of China. Now, even that would be very hard for many members of Congress, I think, although it's clearly the truth. So let's start there. I didn't say legitimacy. We recognize that they lead the People's Republic of China. And saying that the Chinese Communist Party leads the People's Republic of China, when you strip it away, is actually really a tautology. It's not an endorsement. Number 2, The United States does not seek the formal independence of Taiwan and will support any resolution of cross-strait tensions approved by people on both sides of the strait. Now, this does go back to some of the original language, and something that people here may now take issue with. Number 3, while Taiwan's freedom and prosperity are major American concerns, the United States treats Taiwan's elected officials as respected partners, not as national leaders. And then number 4, the United States is committed to working with China, Taiwan, and other parties to promote the peaceful development of the Indo-Pacific. That's the international peace.
What's realistic about your third point?
What's realistic about it?
Yeah, what's realistic about it?
The fact that
That you don't treat their governors, their leaders as national.
you mean, what does this mean in practice?
Well, but is that a realistic statement? You're upset about the communiques having unrealistic elements.
Right.
But you just said something very unrealistic.
Well, we get to define what treatment means. That's the difference. The United States treats Taiwan's elected officials as respected partners, not as national leaders. We are the sole determiner of what that means. And if we decide that we are going to treat respected partners by having, for example, a White House meeting, then that's up to us. That's what's different.
They are national leaders.
4 seems, I don't know
Well-
if you could really go.
Oh, anyway, I don't want to.
That's actually not American policy yet.
I didn't say it was.
Right.
I'm talking about reality.
Well, reality is, if I understand what you just defined, it would mean the recognition of Taiwan, right, as a nation state, which means breaking off with China, which could precipitate the war we're trying to avoid. So if the goal is to avoid war, China is the provocateur, as you say. They're the ones who decide if there's war in the Taiwan Strait. And so the role of diplomacy is, in part, to give them a voice, a role, some kind of assurance.
Really need number 2 or something like it, though?
You don't need number 1 either.
Yeah. Yeah, why would
well-
we recognize leadership?
Well, we don't need it, but China may need it. Again, China still counts. We've gotten a little bit in the habit of speaking of all of these issues as if the 1/5 of humankind, armed to the teeth, hostile across the board, doesn't exist, as though we don't have to speak with them or take their concerns
But we
into
recognize
account
the
at all.
People's Republic as the legitimate government of China. So like, I mean, we wouldn't say the DPP is the leading party of government of Taiwan.
You wouldn't go into signing a declaration with Beijing, with Beijing saying, we acknowledge that the Democratic Party in the United States is the ruling party of the United States.
I wouldn't
say that.
I wouldn't ask China for any such document. I don't care what they recognize. We're working here against the background of the communiques and of the agreements as they in fact exist. And the goal here, again, is to avoid war, and then for it to be as clear as we can be with a government that exists and has power and has a specific history and has specific needs. Again, you can't write them out of the equation of diplomacy with China. China's a piece of that.
But, you know, you're following into the trap with, the Chinese is drawing a red line wherever he wants. And you're actually following his red line, which is, you know, you should draw your own red lines. And particularly on the third point, I do have a point with the your third suggestion, which will fall into their trap also saying, oh, see, United States accepts that the Taiwanese leadership actually is a provincial leadership because they're not nationals.
Well, if we accept them as national leaders,
Well, just don't mention it.
we're talking about recognition. So you're saying take it out. Just take it out altogether.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Why
the
make
dog's
fun
leg.
of who we
Yeah.
are? I mean, if you want to have this ambivalence, which, you know, may work or not, but, you know, and that, I think the strength of U.S. is there's a strategic ambiguity. And then whether.
Not on the nationhood point. That's not the point of strategic ambiguity. Doesn't
Yeah,
concern
but
nationhood.
you don't have to deny it openly, neither.
I think we're going to have to workshop.
No, I
your-
see. No,
your-
I agree. I would welcome it. Let me think. I do see the point. I see the point on number 3. Let me take a look at that. And remember that the first half of it does say that Taiwan's freedom and prosperity are major American concerns. Right? There's something for us. There's something for Taiwan. There's something for China here.
It's like saying freedom and prosperity, Hong Kong is your concern too.
It's not like
Hong
saying
Kong
that
is the
because Hong
Chinese
Kong is part of.
territory.
Didn't we say that?
Yeah.
Didn't we say that more or less?
Yeah.
Which tells you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one thing.
yeah,
right?
yeah. So,
But I'll take it under. I
Thoughts
will
and
take
prayers.
it.
Thoughts and prayers. to
Yeah,
Hong
I'll take
Kong.
it under consideration. I do see your point.
So a couple of things. One, Bridge, I just want to say that my comments about diplomacy and economics and all of that are not, it's not mutually exclusive with the defense issues. But again, I think the lessons that we need to take from Ukraine is look at the strain on defense industrial base. And so there are things we need to do here in the United States to improve our ability to manufacture what would need to be made. And by that, I don't just mean the high-tech stuff and drones. I go back to the things like machine tools. We have got to have a tool and die industry so that we can do it. That said, we also have to have strong allies that we can work with for the things that we can't manufacture and produce. And again, there are lessons to be learned about what is going on with Ukraine. Robert, I guess always my issue, obviously we want to avoid war, but even when you note that is China reassurable and it isn't, it seems to me you're creating a framework that means all of the concessions need to come from us. And that's always been one of my concerns about US-China policy. Something goes wrong, we sort of beg and plead and want to have a meeting. They give us a meeting, and everybody's like, whoa, we've had a meeting. But the onus is always put on us to make the concessions.
Wait. What concessions? I think you're describing a cartoon that may have applied some 10 years ago. I don't think what you just said is a description of where we are now. I think the Biden administration rightly sees itself putting points on the board in the Western Pacific, in the security region, not in the security area. Maybe not adequate.
Just fewer
but definitely-
points than the other side. Like
Well, I'm not sure
restoring more. I'm sure you could disagree, but yeah.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that, but I don't, I mean, I think we're always in a context of, I don't know how we match what they're doing.
Is there a role
right?
for
That's-
American diplomacy vis-a-vis China in maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so let's describe that. I'd love to hear.
Well,
And this is
I'm-
not a denial of the deterrence piece. to
Yeah,
say
no,
about-
I mean, I guess I would just even question, though. I mean, we have tried and we've tried and look what they're doing. I mean, they continue to expand. They continue to create problems for the Philippines, the Indonesia, and Vietnam, all of these places. So I guess I'm getting to the point where I'm hearing this. I'm not sure what we can do diplomatically when, I mean, they're not paying attention, right? They do what they damn well please, regardless of what the world is saying about this. And we're seeing this with their participation and support for Russia. I mean, so Secretary Blinken has a discussion with the Chinese, apparently, about, we don't like what you're doing supporting Russia. Have we seen any difference taking place? No. So I guess, I mean, I didn't walk in thinking, geez, there's no role diplomatically, but I am concerned that we somehow create a framework where we are the ones who have to concede anything in order to get the Chinese to the table on any of these issues.
And do you see the Biden administration as having made concessions to China?
Well, I think that they have made some to get these meetings to take place.
Well,
But
for example?
But I don't, I mean, again, it's sort of a general framework to me about how we have talked about US-China relations over the course of the past 30 years. So, yeah, I'm not critiquing the Biden administration on what they're doing, but I am saying that when you have this avoidance of war framework, we all want to avoid war, shouldn't some of the onus be on the party that would be the likely one to start
Absolutely.
the war and take it on?
Absolutely.
But, I mean, Robert, where I would push back, and I agree with a lot of what Carolyn's saying here, but I also agree with you that diplomacy plays a role. But I think the reason the Biden administration policy is not succeeding is that, and Xi Jinping has said this, and the MSS statement has said that they don't believe our assurances. And what worries me, to your point, is that I'm not sure all of our assurances are totally credible. Right. And so the key thing is that, I mean, you have Gina Raimondo saying on the one side that we are going to hold back future Chinese, kind of semiconductor development, and Xi Jinping is consistently saying that we are strangling them fairly or not. And so Tony Blinken and Janet Yellen going to Beijing is fine in some sense, although there's a supplicant element to it that's off. No, I think there is, but that in and of itself, jaw is not the problem. but that it's not very credible and it's not underwritten by the key point, which is the defense capability, which is negotiating from a position of strength, which I infer is what you're saying. So that to me, the failure of the Biden administration policy is they are trying to persuade Beijing of something which Beijing is not being persuaded from without actually doing, you said points on the board. Yes, they are putting points on the board, but the other team is scoring more points given the military buildup that's going on.
Well, I guess I'd rather, per the ambassador's comments, it's more dissuade than persuade. I think they're unpersuadable, right, in the way that you described.
Beijing.
Yes, but they may be dissuaded.
No, but I think, sorry, just to be clear, I do where I think diplomacy could be useful is if, like, let's get real concrete. Let's say a war decision over Taiwan is essentially, and this is to react to your point, Shioko, it's basically binary because gray zone is never going to solve their problem. It's not going to work. And I don't think Eli Ratner said this, Randy has said, Shriver said this. It's not going. Blockade is not going to work either, and blockade is not a good strategy for the PRC. So it's invasion with blockade, another thing, and they're setting up the conditions. Paparo said recently that now they could go with a very limited warning, and Aquilino says before he left that they're on track to meet their 2027 goals. So you guys should be preparing for an invasion at any time at this point, and it could be 2027. It might never happen, but like from your perspective, you and we need to be prepared. Okay, so if they're making that decision. If it's a binary decision, it's a cosmic roll of the dice, as Harold Brown put it. They want to have as high a probability as they can, recognizing they may have a peaking window of opportunity. They're never going to get to 100%, but you don't need 100%. You know, in 1967, the Israelis didn't have 100% in, you know, et cetera. Countries don't always make a 100% decision, right? But maybe they need to get to like 80%, and that's a balance of opportunity from an opportunistic, aggressive point of view, but also to concede your point, that they believe that we're moving the goalposts and you guys are moving the goalposts. So if there's some way that was, especially in this period of vulnerability, made frankly worse by in some ways by the internationalization and Taiwan's higher profile, right, without a military strengthened, like if anything, now is the time for speak softly and carry a big stick. I think Blinken's comments that I've said this, that I oppose Taiwan independence. Because if there's any way of convincing them on the margin in Beijing that that there is a future possibility,
right,
a genuine future possibility of Deng Xiaoping, future generations, that we are not. And what I say to the Chinese is, you're putting on us as if you are, this is solely a matter of national unification. We can leave aside what exactly that means. But, you know, the point being, China has to explain to us how Taiwan's subordination is consistent with the balance of power in the Pacific. This is because China's too big now. This is not 1949. This is 2024. They have 200 times the shipbuilding capacity of the United States, and they're clearly building a military, and this is a lot of work that you guys have done, that's going to go beyond Taiwan, unquestionably. Mm-hmm. So they need to explain to us also how that is consistent with our interests. So it's not to talk about the onus. It's not just on us. So I've said personally that I'm against Taiwan independence. I don't say that the Communist Party is evil, even though I'm an anti-communist. I don't say Matt Pottinger and Mike Gallagher, friends of mine, I oppose their proposed policy effectively of regime change. That's a lot of things that we could signal to Beijing, especially in this period of vulnerability.
Okay, so I think that was well said, and there's nothing there that I object to. Okay. So the role, but again, can we just find a little bit the role of diplomacy here?
Is important.
Right. Yeah. And it has to do with asking Beijing for clarification of its positions. This is what I.
Well, more than a diplomatic clarification. If Beijing, and I'm going to monopolize here, but if Beijing actually solely wanted to solve the Taiwan problem, it would be building a different military, and it would not be pursuing bases in Cambodia and Djibouti and Oman, and Equatorial Guinea and Tajikistan. So we know, and so now we have to treat China as a superpower, as a mark of respect to 1.4 billion people with immense capacity and ability and hard work. So yes, what I say to the Chinese whenever they say, well, we're just a developing nation. Oh, no. I have a lot of respect for you. I have way too much respect for you. I respect you so much that I'm afraid of you.
No,
not
that's
afraid
right.
so
And
that
then this is part of the thing that's so infuriating in these conversations as China's pose is always that it is somehow geopolitically innocent.
Right,
and is to be understood as such, and that we're just mean.
Is the point.
Right, nobody's innocent. I'm trying to figure out if we have a disagreement here or not, or if we just haven't put a pin in the role.
Actually, I think a lot of what we're all saying is fairly compatible. Not to be boring, but
if I could also add a question here. we talk about the internationalization, the greater profile of Taiwan. What about expectations from the countries surrounding Taiwan to step up? One of the achievements of the Biden administration has been to enhance networks and partnerships on the security front, which has not been matched on the economic front, but let's focus just on the defense side. The United States has high expectations for Japan. It has expectations for South Korea. It has expectations for the Philippines, Australia, and the like. How is that moving forward vis-a-vis coming to the defense of Taiwan?
Well, this is a question for, I guess, Carolyn and Bridge. Do you not see the Biden administration as having made any progress with AUKUS, with South Korea and Japan,
yeah,
with Japan's own
I
protestations?
I acknowledge that.
With more Philippine access? It seems to me that they've actually, over the past year and a half, and I think China knows it, they've been putting points on the board. Now, yes, the scale of China's buildup.
But that's the only thing that matters. Sorry, like, there are no points for second place. So yes, and I mean, Eli Ratner, I have a tremendous respect for. I mean, Kirk Campbell is obviously a very capable guy. They've done a lot of things, but it doesn't matter if it's not enough. So my favorite historical example.
But it matters if it hasn't happened. If none of it had happened, that would be even more worrisome.
Well, sure, of course, but like, the British, people say you can't make strategic shifts. In the years before World War I, the British settled historic disputes, not only with this country, we almost went to war in the 1880s, but also Japan, Russia, and France, its historic enemy for a millennium. It reshaped its military, it reshaped its navy, but it didn't go far enough to deter a German attack in July of 1914 because the Germans calculated the British did not have a standing army of sufficient size and it wasn't in the right place, so it didn't matter. Now, at the end of the day, it was almost like the worst outcome because the British were able to mobilize and hold on with the French and hold on. That's the point, is like, it don't matter if we're doing better. Like, that's why I meant the points on the board is exactly right. We got fat in the offseason or whatever you want to say, and now we're back in shape and we're hitting threes, but meanwhile, LeBron James on the other side. It's like the dream team, and we're like patting ourselves on the back.
No,
that's not.
no,
I think that is
no,
what's
no,
happening.
we're
And
not
the
patting
Kishida,
ourselves on the
I
back.
think the Kishida event, and that's what worries me about all these photo ops. And Taiwan seems to be, we're safe because Kishida and Yoon had a visit in the Camp David. I'm not against those, but I'm very worried that everybody's thinking, everything's great.
Oh, I don't think.
I mean, the
people who
Japanese are going to
focus-
get to 2% of 2022 budget by 2027. What else is supposed to happen maybe in 2027?
So, first I want to clarify, Robert, I was not criticizing the Biden administration for the diplomatic work. You were. I was not. They had a lot of rebuilding to do, and they have done that rebuilding in a remarkable way, I think, over the 3 years that they have now been in power. And I sincerely hope that whatever happens next, those relationships are not destroyed once again. So to me, that they have done.
we'll disagree about that.
We're going to disagree on
So,
this.
so we have 5 minutes, and you've all been incredibly patient. I feel like I ought to take Ambassador Yui's question, but I'm not.
First, Robert says you can't be recognized. Now, sure. I mean, come on.
We want to take a question from Mike.
Thanks. Very rich discussion, and we could go on forever about one China policy, et cetera. I want to make one point to Bridges' questions. There has been a shift in the policy of the Democratic Progressive Party's approach to defense, more money, but more importantly, I think at this point, Wellington Koo Li-xiong, has been named the Minister of National Defense. That's not just him coming into power. There's going to be a whole change in strategy, including very serious change in the reserves. So I think trying to meet some of the questions that you say, whether it's adequate or not, we could argue about that, but I think it's important to put that on the record, that there is a change in process and will be impactful.
Yes, that is what I said, and that's what in my Taipei Times article, that is what I changed based on my discussions with him and others, is that, and I'm not 100% sure, but it struck me that this was a sincere adaptation of what the United States, under governments of both parties, has been pushing. So that's progress, but we're in 2024. So it's all about adequacy at this point.
I do give you credit, Elbridge, on what you said, about Taiwan's sensitivity to possible Chinese attack. And partly because we are a democracy, and partly now with this legislature, and also you correctly mentioned, all parties basically do support a stronger defense and friendly with the United States and China, different opinions, but it has to do with also Ukraine. before the invasion of Ukraine, people in Taiwan, very short, we were calling our expats in Kiev, says, you should leave, the attack is imminent. He said, no. There's still planes out of Kiev, go take the plane, commercial planes. And then later on, there's still buses to Poland, take the bus. And the day before, February 23rd, there was this lady, YouTuber in Taiwanese in Kiev, saying, look at Kiev, everything is fine, restaurants are full, everything's okay. It says, Foreign Ministry, stop calling me, don't harass me, I'm doing fine. Actually, we're doing better than in Taipei. So next day, bombs fall, she calls us, she says, I want to leave.
Yeah.
But Ukraine has sort of, so it is a wake-up call for Taiwan. And the people in Taiwan, the citizens in Taiwan, because we were under Chinese threat for so long, we were numb. So, okay, it's there, I'll work, but. And now it's a reality, it's a possibility, so things are changing in Taiwan. Again, but we are a democracy, so to change that into what Michael Fonte mentioned, about strengthening our defense and also the civilian preparation, the mindset to prepare for this is actually growing, but we are a democracy. But we're coming back to the first, I think Carol mentioned, it is, or you mentioned, it's, the world now, actually, it's two fronts, democracy versus autocracy. So there are two forces hitting each other. So the question is not only just Taiwan, but it's a much larger issue. China has a lot of issues with Vietnam, with Philippines, Japan, India, etc. So they are the warmongers. They think they're bigger, so they're better, and so they're going to replace the United States. So and also, looking at the world stage, there's an alliance of forces getting together. It's China with Russia, Iran, etc. So look at Africa, Mali and Niger and Burkina Faso, throwing out. First of all, they throw out their pre-colonial French, masters, and now they're ejecting the United States presence. So it's not a coincidence. There's a larger game at play, and diplomacy, this U.S. diplomacy actually, I think, at work is realigning the forces on this side to make sure that the other forces do not get away with it.
Well, so I don't think that's the accurate way of portraying what's happening in the world, but I mean, that is the way the Biden administration, and obviously your policy now is closely associated with the Biden administration's policy, which I don't think is.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question?
Yeah.
How realistic would it be for the United States to adopt as a policy, trying to reverse the decision of some countries to recognize Beijing instead of
I don't think that's as good.
I think it's a waste of time.
And it would be, actually, I've always thought, like, the fewer countries recognize the Republic of China, then the less credible it is that it's not. Anyway, but I don't think we need to put all of our effort into the concrete struggle. But if we take your logic actually on face value, things are not going very well. So what does that suggest to you? I mean, your foreign minister's out there and Vice President-Elect saying that the future of Ukraine is so critical. I mean, unfortunately, things are not. By the way, the Europeans can't even deal with Ukraine yet. So what you should, I mean, the analogy I use, there's a dragon in your face.
Yeah.
And that you're worried about a bear attacking somebody else a half mile away. This is how.
If the supplemental we got the 60 billion, we would have been happy too.
Well, that's not what you said. That's what I was saying, and that's not what you said.
No, that's
Sorry
that's
to be,
not what I
but
said.
We've only got 2 minutes. I'd like to bring in one more factor if I could.
Because
would've been nice to get
we're
that
not
60
at war. We're not at war.
But you
yet.
could be at a war, to your point, tomorrow. It could happen tomorrow.
Many things can happen tomorrow. There's a whole range of possibilities for tomorrow. There's a
invasion by
piece that
China.
we haven't raised yet. I want to come back to the basketball analogy, which China likes. It actually explains its idea of win-win outcomes. You got 90 points, we got 110, we both scored points, what's the problem here, right?
Right.
The thing that we're missing is that in China, the coach, Xi Jinping, is not just playing basketball. He may not even primarily be playing basketball. He's also trying to run a very large, deeply challenged, complex country in which he has to worry about the welfare of his people, or he will lose his job. We've been speaking of China so far as though it is nothing but a military actor of infinite appetite. And that's simply not true. It has a military realm as we do, but it's not always decisive, and it's not always primary. He has major economic problems, which could become social problems and political problems. He has to balance them there. That is still where the Communist Party's bread is buttered, in providing for the economic well-being of the Chinese people. And in that, the totality of China, the complexity, the reality of it, the fact that China is dynamic and still changing, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for diplomacy based on an understanding of China and its complex list of goals, all of which we can have an impact on. So I don't disagree that deterrence is a major part of all of this, but let's remember that China is not a unitary actor. It is not just a military on the roll. It's a great many things otherwise, and the economics piece, I think, obviously there are relationships between the two, is still the primary piece for the Communist Party. We need to keep our eye on that when we speak about China. We must remember that it's something other than its growing and very worrisome military capability, because there's opportunity for us there to have an impact on outcomes.
And I'm afraid we're going to have to bring this conversation to a conclusion, but perhaps to wrap it up, Taiwan's precarious relations with China is at first and foremost a political issue with the military component. It's not simply a military challenge. But okay, so that's not concluding this in a but we can obviously there is much to discuss. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you could also join me in thanking Ambassador Yui, Ambassador Negroponte, Carolyn, Bridge, and Robert. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.